Well, earlier this week, actor Marlon Brando met with Jewish leaders to apologize for comments he made on Larry King Live. Among them, that, quote, Hollywood is run by Jews. The Jewish leaders accepted the actor's apology and announced that Brando is now free to work again. At Virginia Commonwealth University, a professor is being sued following revelations that he spanked one of his students. It was the student's parents who first became suspicious when they asked, "What kind of marks are you getting?" And she replied, "Big red ones on my ass." Yippee! Jerry Rubin died last week. Oh, I'm sorry. That should read, Yippee! Jerry Rubin died last week. Sorry about that. I'm sorry. My mistake completely. I didn't read it right. Former First Lady Nancy Reagan reports that her husband has been relaxing at their ranch, riding horses and chopping wood. Sadly, eyewitnesses report that he was actually riding wood and chopping horses.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, Ayn Rand Tuesday, December the 5th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Military Shorts, Howard Roark, 33 Strategies of War, and the latest version or part of Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy, Who Needs It? All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I shouldn't change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
In their unique style of marching, one of John Philip Sousa's best-known marches, the Stars and Stripes Forever.
Thank you. Now, the military shorts.
What happens when a Navy gunship attacks a cruise liner? Imagine this. You are armed with a 76mm main gun, air missile defense, and 2 smaller machine guns. And somehow you lose to a ship used to see penguins. In international waters, there was a German cruise liner called the Resolute. It had stopped for engine repairs. Things quickly took a turn when the ship caught the attention of a Venezuelan patrol boat named Neguato. The patrol boat demanded the crews to change course towards a Venezuelan port. But the Resolute crew ignored the orders and called their German headquarters. Suddenly, Neguato's captain opened fire at the crews, which the Resolute still ignored. Determined to get them to listen, the Venezuelans began to ram against the side of the liner, unaware that their target was designed to hold up against icebergs. However, the Venezuelan gunship kept pushing, losing strength with every hit against the liner's structure. It had slowly destroyed itself and sank to the bottom of the ocean, losing to a Penguin cruise liner.
This sound is a big reason why the A-10 Warthog is such a popular aircraft. Originally built during the Cold War to take out tank columns in Europe, the Warthog ultimately proved itself to be a deadly weapon in the close air support role, rescuing friendly ground troops again and again in Iraq and Afghanistan with its 30mm Avenger cannon. But for decades, the Air Force has been trying to get rid of this aircraft, only to be stopped by Congress again and again. You see, while the Air Force argues that the A-10 is too vulnerable against modern air defenses and takes crucial resources away from the newer F-35, members of Congress claim that the F-35 is not yet able to replace the A-10 in the close air support role, which is why since 2014, Congress has stepped in at least 5 times to protect the A-10 from early retirement. Finally, in 2023, Congress allowed 21 Warthogs to be retired, marking the beginning of the end for this polarizing aircraft.
Today's soldiers wear their advanced combat helmets nice, tight, and securely buckled. But it wasn't always that way. In World War II, soldiers could usually be seen wearing their helmets unbuckled with the chin strap hanging off to the side, just like John Wayne. It was a cool look, but not exactly secure. But it wasn't just a fashion statement. The M1 helmet, the typical helmet of World War II soldiers, was significantly heavier than today's models. So heavy, in fact, that it made some soldiers feel like their heads were unbalanced. If they were hit by an explosion or small arms fire that made their head snap back, these soldiers were worried that the extra weight could break their necks, so they kept the helmets unbuckled, so it would just fly off instead of taking their head with it. Plus, the helmet was useful for other things. It could be used as an informal digging tool, as long as you washed it out after, and could even be used as a wash basin or for making coffee. Don't tell the commanders about that one. It was technically forbidden to put it over fire. It was a versatile tool, and for a while, it was even a command order to keep it unbuckled.
Israel is now getting hit by mortars from Syria in addition to rockets from Lebanon, and Israel is responding with counter-battery fire. So far, 1,000 Israelis have been killed with another 3,400 injured, and reportedly 900 Palestinians have been killed with another 4,500 injured. This as Israel is preparing a months-long ground campaign in Gaza, according to Egypt, with the Times of Israel reporting that Egypt also said that Israel has dismissed their efforts to mediate any kind of de-escalation. The Times also saying it's believed that Israel wants to destroy Hamas before entertaining a ceasefire. Also, the Wall Street Journal reporting the United States may deploy a second aircraft carrier strike group to Israel. This is the USS Gerald Ford has arrived off the coast of Israel and will likely begin operations tonight. This has also made Erdogan very mad at Israel and the United States, with him angrily asking today, why is the U.S. aircraft carrier coming to Israel? For what? What will they do? Will they hit Gaza with their warplanes and commit a massacre? Though Jake Sullivan responded saying, let me be clear, we did not move the carrier for Hamas. We moved the carrier to send a clear message of deterrence to other parties who may seek to widen the war. But as always, this is a developing situation, so follow to stay in the loop.
We're on a hill looking down over the valley, beautiful little valley. At the bottom of the valley is a town called Ormond. The captain did not want us to go charging down the hill because it was open all the way, and with the Germans down in the town with tanks and with machine guns firing at us. So he said, I'm going to call in Corps artillery. So after giving the command, I could hear a rumbling over the horizon, just like thunder. And that's the big 240 long rifles firing. Then a second later, the 240 howitzers start firing. Then the 150 long rifles. Then the 150 howitzers. Then the 105 long rifle. Then 105 howitzers. Normally, when one shell goes over, you can't see it. But so many shells were up there that I could catch the flickers of light as they went over. And looking down at the town, these 540 shells all arrived at the same second on top of that town. And it just lit up that town like you wouldn't believe. Greatest sight I ever saw in my life.
It is difficult to say definitively which country has the best submarines, as it depends on the specific criteria being used for evaluation. However, the United States Navy is certainly considered to have some of the most advanced and capable submarines in the world. The U.S. Navy operates a variety of submarines, including the Virginia-class attack submarine and the Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine, both of which are considered to be among the most advanced and capable submarines in the world. Additionally, the U.S. Navy has a long history of submarine development and innovation, which has contributed to its reputation as a leader in submarine technology. Again, it depends on the mission. A Virginia class would not be as good as the Gotland class in defending the fjords and coastal waters of Sweden. The Gotland cannot do the missions of the Virginia, yet both are arguably the best for their intended missions.
Watch as Marines surprise this World War II veteran. When Marines arrived in Port Everglades for Fleet Week, the local sheriff informed them that there was a true war hero who lived nearby, and that he had a very particular problem the Marines might be able to help him with. The man was a Marine aviator who piloted planes in World War II and had over 100 combat missions in the Korean War. Captain Robert Woody Woodbury needed help with something that might sound small, but that was very important to him. He needed the old and worn American flag he had flying in his front yard replaced. Captain Woodbury would barely believe it when Marines from the Expeditionary Strike Group brought over a flag that had actually been flown on a U.S. ship that very morning. After saluting the new flag, he said that he was flattered beyond comprehension, that he was really red, white, and blue.
Russia tried to build a bomber to destroy the entire USA, but it failed. Let me explain. Back in the late 1950s, Russia set out on a mission to construct an aircraft with the potential to destroy entire U.S. cities. The Soviet Union revealed the bomber as the DLK Dark Star, a revolutionary hypersonic strategic bomber with a design straight out of a movie. This jet would be like nothing ever made before. It was set to be powered by 6 turbojets, each producing a staggering 25,000 pounds of force. If everything went to plan, the aircraft would reach Mach 4 and go to altitudes beyond 60,000 feet. But here's the problem. The Dark Star wasn't just about speed and altitude. It was equipped with the capability to carry unbelievable weapons, including hypersonic cruise missiles, unguided drop bombs, and air-to-air missiles. However, the bomber was so advanced that it came with budget and technological challenges that it never made it past the drawing board.
The MiG-29 is an iconic fighter aircraft. While its appearance may seem peculiar, the design serves crucial purposes that contribute to its exceptional performance. The MiG-29 is a high-performance jet fighter aircraft developed by the Soviet Union during the Cold War era. When designing an aircraft, various factors come into play, including aerodynamics, performance, stability, and mission requirements. One of the most distinctive features of the MiG-29 is its humpback shape. The curved upper fuselage of the MiG-29 provides additional space for fuel tanks, allowing the aircraft to carry a larger quantity of fuel. Increased range and mission capabilities, enabling the aircraft to operate over longer distances. The original MiG-29 had a limited fuel carrying capacity, which gave it a poor range of only 750 miles. The UPG upgrade, which was introduced in the 1990s, increased the fuel capacity of the MiG-29 to 1,300 miles. This significantly improved the aircraft's range and mission capabilities. Iran had expressed interest in buying the MiG-29 from Moldova, and the U.S. government was concerned that this would give Iran a significant boost in its air combat capabilities. The U.S. military bought 21 MiG-29 fighters in 1997 from Moldova. The MiG-29 is a fourth-generation fighter aircraft that is still in service with many air forces around the world. It is a highly maneuverable aircraft with a powerful radar and a variety of air-to-air and air-to-ground weapons. The MiG-29 was a relatively new aircraft at the time, and the U.S. military was eager to learn more about its strengths and weaknesses. By acquiring and evaluating the MiG-29, the U.S. military could gain valuable insights into how to counter this aircraft in combat. The U.S. military retired the MiG-29 in 2003, but they still provide valuable insights into the capabilities of Russian aircraft. The U.S. military continues to use this information to train its pilots and develop new tactics and technologies.
And that was the military shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
You're not just dumbly here or a result of a cosmic accident. No, you've been willed into existence by God. Why did he create you? because he's got a mission for you. Hey, it might not be what the world thinks is important. Who cares? What's your mission from God? Might be the quietest thing. It's little in the eyes of the world, but great in the eyes of God. Now, here's the point. Once you understand what that is, move, act. Don't procrastinate. Don't fall asleep. Go in haste. Don't waste time. Life is short, and the mission is clear. Be about the work the Lord has given you to do.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. So since it's Ayn Rand Tuesday, I'm going to play a 6-minute speech of Howard Roark, played by Gary Cooper, in the movie The Fountainhead.
I solemnly ask of every man who hears this case to let his own mind pronounce a verdict upon it. You have heard the testimony of the state's witnesses. The confession of Peter Keating has made clear that Howard Roark is a ruthless egoist who has destroyed Cortlandt Homes for his own selfish motive. The issue which you are to decide is the crucial issue of our age. Has man any right to exist if he refuses to serve society? Let your verdict give us the answer. The state rests.
The defense may proceed.
Your Honor, I shall call no witnesses. This will be my testimony and my summation.
Take the oath.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Thousands of years ago, the first man discovered how to make fire. He was probably burned at the stake he had taught his brothers to light, but he left them a gift they had not conceived, and he lifted darkness off the earth. Throughout the centuries, there were men who took first steps down new roads, armed with nothing but their own vision. The great creators, the thinkers, the artists, the scientists, the inventors, stood alone against the men of their time. Every new thought was opposed. Every new invention was denounced. But the men of unborrowed vision went ahead. They fought, they suffered, and they paid, but they won. No creator was prompted by a desire to please his brothers. His brothers hated the gift he offered. His truth was his only motive. His work was his only goal. His work, not those who used it. His creation, not the benefits others derived from it. The creation which gave form to his truth. He held his truth above all things and against all men. He went ahead, whether others agreed with him or not, with his integrity as his only banner. He served nothing and no one. He lived for himself. And only by living for himself was he able to achieve the things which are the glory of mankind. Such is the nature of achievement. Man cannot survive except through his mind. He comes on earth unarmed. His brain is his only weapon. But the mind is an attribute of the individual. There is no such thing as a collective brain. The man who thinks must think and act on his own. The reasoning mind cannot work under any form of compulsion. It cannot be subordinated to the needs, opinions, or wishes of others. It is not an object of sacrifice. The Creator stands on his own judgment. The parasite follows the opinions of others. The Creator thinks. The parasite copies. The Creator produces. The parasite loots. The Creator's concern is the conquest of nature. The parasite's concern is the conquest of man. The Creator requires independence. He neither serves nor rules. He deals with men by free exchange and voluntary choice. The parasite seeks power. He wants to bind all men together in common action and common slavery. He claims that man is only a tool for the use of others, that he must think as they think, act as they act, and live in selfless, joyless servitude to any need but his own. Look at history. Everything we have, every great achievement has come from the independent work of some independent mind. Every horror and destruction came from attempts to force men into a herd of brainless, soulless robots. without personal rights, without personal ambition, without will, hope, or dignity. It is an ancient conflict. It has another name: the individual against the collective. Our country, the noblest country in the history of men, was based on the principle of individualism, the principle of man's inalienable rights. It was a country where a man was free to seek his own happiness, to gain and produce, not to give up and renounce, to prosper, not to starve, to achieve, not to plunder, to hold as his highest possession a sense of his personal value, and as his highest virtue, his self-respect. Look at the results. That is what the collectivists are now asking you to destroy, as much of the earth has been destroyed. I am an architect. I know what is to come by the principle on which it is built. We are approaching a world in which I cannot permit myself to live. My ideas are my property. They were taken from me by force, by breach of contract. No appeal was left to me. It was believed that my work belonged to others to do with as they pleased. They had a claim upon me without my consent, that it was my duty to serve them without choice or reward. Now you know why I dynamited Cortland. I designed Cortland. I made it possible. I destroyed it. I agreed to design it for the purpose of seeing it built as I wished. That was the price I set for my work. I was not paid. My building was disfigured at the whim of others who took all the benefits of my work and gave me nothing in return. I came here to say that I do not recognize anyone's right to 1 minute of my life, nor to any part of my energy, nor to any achievement of mine, no matter who makes the claim. It had to be said. The world is perishing from an orgy of self-sacrificing. I came here to be heard in the name of every man of independence still left in the world. I wanted to state my terms. I do not care to work or live on any others. My terms are a man's right to exist for his own sake.
And that was, again, Gary Cooper playing the role of Howard Roark in the movie version of Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the next to last of the next 10 minutes of Chapter 1, Declare War on Your Enemies, from The 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene.
It is through your battles with others that you learn what works, what doesn't, and how to protect yourself. Instead of shrinking from the idea of having enemies, then embrace it. Conflict is therapeutic. Enemies bring many gifts. For one thing, they motivate you and focus your beliefs. The artist Salvador Dali found early on that there were many qualities he could not stand in people: conformity, romanticism, piety. At every stage of his life, he found someone he thought embodied these anti-ideals, an enemy to vent on. First, it was the poet Federico Garcia Lorca, who wrote romantic poetry. Then it was André Breton, the heavy-handed leader of the Surrealist movement. Having such enemies to rebel against made Dali feel confident and inspired. Enemies also give you a standard by which to judge yourself, both personally and socially. The samurai of Japan had no gauge of their excellence unless they fought the best swordsman. It took Joe Frazier to make Muhammad Ali a truly great fighter. A tough opponent will bring out the best in you, and the bigger the opponent, the greater your reward, even in defeat. It is better to lose to a worthy opponent than to squash some harmless foe. You will gain sympathy and respect, building support for your next fight. Being attacked is a sign that you are important enough to be a target. You should relish the attention and the chance to prove yourself. We all have aggressive impulses that we are forced to repress. An enemy supplies you with an outlet for these drives. At last, you have someone on whom to unleash your aggression without feeling guilty. Leaders have always found it useful to have an enemy at their gates in times of trouble, distracting the public from their difficulties. In using your enemies to rally your troops, polarize them as far as possible. They will fight the more fiercely when they feel a little hatred. So exaggerate the differences between you and the enemy. Draw the lines clearly. Xenophon made no effort to be fair. He did not say that the Persians weren't really such a bad lot and had done much to advance civilization. He called them barbarians, the antithesis of the Greeks. He described their recent treachery and said they were an evil culture that could find no favor with the gods. And so it is with you. Victory is your goal, not fairness and balance. Use the rhetoric of war to heighten the stakes and stimulate the spirit. What you want in warfare is room to maneuver. Tight corners spell death. Having enemies gives you options. You can play them off against each other. Make one a friend as a way of attacking the other, on and on. Without enemies, you will not know how or where to maneuver, and you will lose a sense of your limits, of how far you can go. Early on, Julius Caesar identified Pompey as his enemy. Measuring his actions and calculating carefully, he did only those things that left him in a solid position in relation to Pompey. When war finally broke out between the two men, Caesar was at his best. But once he defeated Pompey and had no more such rivals, he lost all sense of proportion. In fact, he fancied himself a god. His defeat of Pompey was his own undoing. Your enemies force on you a sense of realism and humility. Remember, there are always people out there who are more aggressive, more devious, more ruthless than you are, and it is inevitable that some of them will cross your path. You will have a tendency to want to conciliate and compromise with them. The reason is that such types are often brilliant deceivers who see the strategic value in charm or in seeming to allow you plenty of space, but actually their desires have no limit and they are simply trying to disarm you. With some people, you have to harden yourself to recognize that there is no middle ground, no hope of conciliation. For your opponent, your desire to compromise is a weapon to use against you. Know these dangerous enemies by their past. Look for quick power grabs, sudden rises in fortune, previous acts of treachery. Once you suspect you are dealing with a Napoleon, do not lay down your arms or entrust them to someone else. You are the last line of your own defense. Reversal. Always keep the search for and use of enemies under control. It is clarity you want, not paranoia. It is the downfall of many tyrants to see an enemy in everyone. They lose their grip on reality and become hopelessly embroiled in the emotions their paranoia churns up. By keeping an eye on possible enemies, you are simply being prudent and cautious. Keep your suspicions to yourself, so that if you're wrong, no one will know. Also, beware of polarizing people so completely that you cannot back off. Margaret Thatcher, usually brilliant at the polarizing game, eventually lost control of it. She created too many enemies and kept repeating the same tactic, even in situations that called for retreat. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a master polarizer, always looking to draw a line between himself and his enemies. Once he had made that line clear enough, though, he backed off, which made him look like a conciliator, a man of peace, who occasionally went to war. Even if that impression was false, it was the height of wisdom to create it. Here are further reflections on the strategy of polarity. From Anabasis, The March Up Country, by Xenophon. Then Xenophon got up and first called together the under-officers of Proxenus. When they were collected, he said, "Gentlemen, I cannot sleep, and I don't think you can. And I can't lie here when I see what a plight we are in. It is clear that the enemy did not show us open war until they thought they had everything well prepared, and no one among us takes the pains to make the best possible resistance. Yet if we give way and fall into the king's power, what do we expect our fate will be? When his own half-brother was dead, the man cut off his head and cut off his hand and stuck them up on a pole. We have no one to plead for us, and we marched here to make the king a slave or to kill him if we could, and what do you think our fate will be? Would he not go to all extremes of torture to make the whole world afraid of making war on him? Why, we must do anything to keep out of his power. While the truce lasted, I never ceased pitying ourselves. I never ceased congratulating the king and his army. What a vast country I saw. How large, what endless provisions, what crowds of servants, how many cattle and sheep, what gold, what raiment. But when I thought of these, our soldiers, we had no share in all these good things unless we bought them, and few had anything left to buy with. And to procure anything without buying was debarred by our oaths. While I reasoned like this, I sometimes feared the truce more than the war now. However, now they have broken the truce. There is an end both to their insolence and to our suspicion. There lie all these good things before us, prizes for whichever side prove the better men. The gods are the judges of the contest, and they will be with us naturally. When you have appointed as many commanders as are wanted, assemble all the other soldiers and encourage them. That will be just what they want now. Perhaps you have noticed yourselves how crestfallen they were when they came into camp, how crestfallen they went on guard. In such a state, I don't know what you could do with them, but if someone could turn their minds from wondering what will happen to them and make them wonder what they could do, they will be much more cheerful. You know, I am sure that not numbers or strength brings victory in war, but whichever army goes into battle stronger in soul, their enemies generally cannot withstand them. By Carl Schmitt. Political thought and political instinct prove themselves theoretically and practically in the ability to distinguish friend and enemy. The high points of politics are simultaneously the moments in which the enemy is, in concrete clarity, recognized as the enemy. By Friedrich Nietzsche. I am by nature warlike. To attack is among my instincts. To be able to be an enemy, that presupposes a strong nature. It is in any event a condition of every strong nature. It needs resistances. Consequently, it seeks resistances.
And that was the next part of Chapter 1, Declare War on Your Enemies, from the 33 Strategies of War. Next week, the last part of Chapter 1. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Ayn Rand's Philosophy Who Needs It, the end of Chapter 15.
You may now expect 50 different frontiers inside this country, with customs officials searching your luggage, and pockets for books or magazines permitted in one state, but prohibited in another. Chief Justice Berger's decision declares, quoting an earlier court decision, "The motive and purpose of a regulation of interstate commerce are matters for the legislative judgment upon the exercise of which the Constitution places no restriction and over which the courts are given no control." Such an interpretation means that legislative judgment is given an absolute power beyond the restraint of any principle, beyond the reach of any checks or balances. This is an outrageous instance of context dropping. The Constitution, taken as a whole, is a fundamental restriction on the power of the government, whether in the legislative or in any other branch. It is sufficient to reiterate, Mr. Berger declares, the well-settled principle that Congress may impose relevant conditions and requirements on those who use the channels of interstate commerce in order that those channels will not become the means of promoting or spreading evil, whether of a physical, moral, or economic nature. As if this were not clear enough, a footnote is added. Congress can certainly regulate interstate commerce to the extent of forbidding and punishing the use of such commerce as an agency to promote immorality, dishonesty, or the spread of any evil or harm to the people of other states from the state of origin. Immorality, evil, and harm, by what standard? The only rights which the 5 majority decisions leave you are the right to read and see what you wish in your own room, but not outside it, and the right to think whatever you please in the privacy of your own mind. But this is a right which even a totalitarian dictatorship is unable to suppress. You are free to think in Soviet Russia, but not to act on your thinking. Again, Justice Douglas's dissent is the only voice raised in desperate protest. Our whole constitutional heritage rebels at the thought of giving government the power to control men's minds. The division between the conservative and the liberal viewpoints in the opinions of the Supreme Court is sharper and clearer than in less solemn writings or in purely political debates. By the nature of its task, the Supreme Court has to, and does, become the voice of philosophy. The necessity to deal with principles makes the members of the Supreme Court seem archetypal of the ideas, almost of the soul, of the 2 political camps they represent. They were not chosen as archetypes in the undefined, indeterminate, contradictory chaos of political views loosely labeled conservative and liberal. It would be impossible to choose an essential characteristic or typical representative. Yet, as one reads the Supreme Court's opinions, the essential premises stand out with an oddly bright, revealing clarity, and one grasps that under all the lesser differences and inconsistencies of their followers, these are the basic premises of one political camp or of the other. It is almost as if one were seeing not these antagonists' philosophy, but their sense of life. The subject of the 5 obscenity cases was not obscenity as such, which is a marginal and inconsequential matter, but a much deeper issue, the sexual aspect of man's life. Sex is not a separate or purely physical attribute of man's character. It involves a complex integration of all his fundamental values. So it is not astonishing that cases dealing with sex, even in its ugliest manifestations, would involve the influence of all the branches of philosophy. We have seen the influence of ethics, epistemology, politics, aesthetics, this last as the immediate victim of the debate. What about the 5th branch of philosophy, the basic one, the fundamental of the science of fundamentals, metaphysics? Its influence is revealed in and explains the inner contradictions of each camp. The metaphysical issue is their view of man's nature. Both camps hold the same premise, the mind-body dichotomy, but choose opposite sides of this lethal fallacy. The conservatives want freedom to act in the material realm. They tend to oppose government control of production, of industry, of trade, of business, of physical goods, of material wealth. But they advocate government control of man's spirit, i.e., man's consciousness. They advocate the state's right to impose censorship, to determine moral values, to create and enforce a governmental establishment of morality, to rule the intellect. The liberals want freedom to act in the spiritual realm. They oppose censorship. They oppose government control of ideas, of the arts, of the press, of education. Note their concern with academic freedom. But they advocate government control of material production, of business, of employment, of wages, of profits, of all physical property. They advocate it all the way down to total expropriation. The conservatives see man as a body freely roaming the earth, building sand piles or factories, with an electronic computer inside his skull, controlled from Washington. The liberals see man as a soul freewheeling to the farthest reaches of the universe, but wearing chains from nose to toes when he crosses the street to buy a loaf of bread. Yet it is the conservatives who are predominantly religionists, who proclaim the superiority of the soul over the body, who represent what I call the mystics of spirit. And it is the liberals who are predominantly materialists, who regard man as an aggregate of meat, and who represent what I call the mystics of muscle. This is merely a paradox, not a contradiction. Each camp wants to control the realm it regards as metaphysically important. Each grants freedom only to the activities it despises. Observe that the conservatives insult and demean the rich or those who succeed in material production, regarding them as morally inferior, and that the liberals treat ideas as a cynical con game. Control in both camps means the power to rule by physical force. Neither camp holds freedom as a value. The conservatives want to rule man's consciousness, the liberals his body. On that premise, neither camp has permitted itself to observe that force is a killer in both realms. The conservatives, frozen in their mystic dogmas, are paralyzed, terrified, and impotent in the realm of ideas. The liberals, waiting for the unearned, are paralyzed, terrified, and frequently incompetent in or hostile to the realm of material production. Observe the ecology crusade. Why do both camps cling to blind faith in the power of physical force? I quote from Atlas Shrugged. Do you observe what human faculty that doctrine, the mind-body dichotomy, was designed to destroy? It was man's mind that had to be negated in order to make him fall apart. Both camps, conservatives and liberals alike, are united in their hatred of man's mind, i.e., of reason. The conservatives reject reason in favor of faith, the liberals in favor of emotions. The conservatives are either lethargically indifferent to intellectual issues or actively anti-intellectual. The liberals are smarter in this respect. They use intellectual weapons to destroy and negate the intellect. They call it to redefine. When men reject reason, they have no means left for dealing with one another except brute physical force. I quote from Atlas Shrugged. The men you call materialists and spiritualists are only two halves of the same dissected human, forever seeking completion, but seeking it by swinging from the destruction of the flesh to the destruction of the soul, and vice versa. Seeking any refuge against reality, any form of escape from the mind. Since the two camps are only two sides of the same coin, the same counterfeit coin, they are now moving closer and closer together. Observe the fundamental similarity of their philosophical views. In metaphysics, the mind-body dichotomy. In epistemology, irrationalism. In ethics, altruism. In politics, statism. The conservatives used to claim that they were loyal to tradition, while the liberals boasted of being progressive. But observe that it is Chief Justice Burger, a conservative, who propounds a militant collectivism and formulates general principles that stretch the power of the state way beyond the issue of pornography. And it is Justice Douglas, a liberal, who invokes the traditions of a free society and pleads for our constitutional heritage. If someone had said in 1890 that antitrust laws for the businessmen would, sooner or later, lead to censorship for the intellectuals, no one would have believed it. You can see it today. When Chief Justice Burger declares to the liberals that they cannot explain why rights should be severely restrained in the marketplace of goods and money, but not in the marketplace of pornography, I am tempted to feel that it serves them right, except that all of us are the victims. If this censorship ruling is not revoked, the next step will be more explicit. It will replace the words marketplace of pornography with the words marketplace of ideas. This would serve as a precedent for the liberals, enabling them to determine which ideas they wish to suppress, in the name of the social interest, when their turn comes. No one can win a contest of this kind, except the state. I do not know how the conservative members of the Supreme Court can bear to look at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, where his words are engraved in marble. I have sworn eternal hostility to every form of tyranny over the mind of man. Permit me to add without presumptuousness, so have I.
And that was the end of chapter 15 from Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy, Who Needs It? And again, what she's talking about here is a pornography case from back in the 1970s. But what it's about, essentially, is government rights. Government rights versus individual rights. The individual, in this case the business, claims to have the right to operate. And since he's not engaged in blatantly illegal activities, such as selling drugs or something of that nature, fencing items, he's not a criminal, then he has the right to engage in whatever business he sees fit. The other side is arguing that the government has the right to regulate or do away with pornography. And so the court's being asked to balance those rights. You'll hear it and have heard it many times. The lawyers call it the balancing test. But they don't call it government rights. They call it compelling interest, that the government has a compelling interest in this or that. And it's baloney. There is no such thing in the Constitution. There is no compelling interest. It's just a code word for government rights. The government has the right to do something. And it's not true. And think about a society in which we have dueling rights. And what does that do to our society? What does that do to the stability of our society? At some point, we're going to have to go one way or the other. We either have to say, no more government rights. Government has no rights, period. And so in this particular case, the government is out of bounds and violating the individual's rights and must knock it off. Or we have to say, you know what? We're tired of democracy and we'd much rather have an authoritarian form of government, a dictatorship, and let the government have all the rights. But we cannot have a stable society in which there are dueling rights. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you to be honest, smart, and beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.